Hey, we're listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health. My name is Josh. I am the co-host, and I'm flying solo for this adventure. I have no Nugs, I have no Mark, but I am joined by one half of our uh, network brothers and sisters over at Brilliant but Lazy, Mr. Joshua Howe.
That's right. Brilliant, but lazy. It's coming along. Alan and I have been recording some back and forth, and it's been fun. We've been keeping busy, but yeah, thanks for having me over.
Yeah, I was really enthusiastic about having someone to talk about this movie with, especially after watching it. Um, but before we jump into that, let's talk about Brilliant but Lazy. For those that may or may not know, give us kind of like the elevator pitch of the show.
Brilliant, but lazy is just, Alan and I were kind of the Marvel correspondents for a year, maybe a year plus for Victims and Villains, and we talk about any Marvel movie that came out in the theaters or any Disney Plus show, and honestly, while we're big Marvel fans, every time something else came up, it was everything we could do to not talk about something else. Like, you know, we we'd be talking about, the latest episode of She-Hulk or something, and Andor would just have this amazing episode, and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, Alan, I need to talk to you about Andor," but we couldn't do it on the Marvel show. So um, we came up with Brilliant but Lazy, which is a nod to some old school, Spider-Man lines, and it's just kind of a catch-all. We're both nerds. As long as it's not something that's already being covered on one of the other podcasts in the Victims and Villains Network, we cover it. So sometimes we talk about, a new property that came out, like the latest season of Ted Lasso, or we'll talk about something in the past. Um, like we did a retro review of Howard the Duck, and really just anything that comes to mind. We try to put out a couple things a month, and yeah, I think our latest one came out on the 4th, and it was, what was it? It was obviously something Star Wars related. I'm
I,
not
I think
sure.
I'm pretty sure you guys did Mandalorian season
That's
three, and
right. We
still
did Mando. Yeah, and we just recorded our review for Guardians of the Galaxy 3 whenever that drops, but yeah, it's a good time. It's just a bunch of everything, and that's our rating system. Real simple, brilliant or lazy, and that's just how we go. So yeah, I like it. It's fun.
all right, well, you guys can check out Brilliant but Lazy wherever you guys get your podcast from. So if you guys are into it's still a relatively new show. I think it's under 10 episodes at this point. They've covered everything from Star Wars, as Josh said, to Ted Lasso, to all of the uh other major releases as far as comic book movies and fantasies go as well. If you guys are fans of Power Rangers, they've done that. Picard, they've done that. So go check them out and wherever you guys get your podcast from. But Josh, this is your first time on Abyss Gazing. So let's ask this question. What is your favorite horror movie?
Oh gosh, man, you're gonna drop that on me like that? Shoot. I'm trying to think. Give me a second. Give me a second. Give me a second. I would say I Saw the Devil, which is a Korean film. Um, it came out in 2010, and it's kind of that old school horror, that thriller horror. Like back in the day, Silence of the Lambs used to be considered, like top notch horror. Now it's more thriller compared to some of the more gory slasher stuff and jump scares and everything. But I Saw the Devil is creepy and twisted as fuck, and it's Korean, and all those things I jive with. So that's probably my favorite.
Interesting. I've never heard anyone say that. I've heard people speak highly of I Saw the Devil, but never call it their favorites. That's really awesome.
Have you seen it? Do you know what it is?
I have not. It has been on my list for probably 2 or 3 years at this point.
Mm,
I I'm one of those guys. I love foreign films, but I really have to be like in the mood to like want to also read.
I hear you. I lived in Korea, so I did this thing where we had a bootleg shop right outside of base, and that was really the only way I could keep up with American movies, because by the time they made it over to our base, the little theater on base, it'd be 6, 7 months later. So every weekend when I got paid, I'd go off to this bootleg shop and I would get a bootleg version of some movie that just dropped in the US. And then I'd tell myself, you know what, I'm going to try to culture myself up. So I'd get one American movie and one Korean movie based on, whatever suggestion the shop owner had. And I watched some amazing films like Selma Dio, A Bittersweet Life, and some other films. And one of my favorite actors, I'm gonna screw up his name, but his name's Lee Byung Young. He was in G.I. Joe, The Rise of Cobra, and he's been in some other American stuff. But one of his original films was A Bittersweet Life, where he just plays this gangster that goes against the family, and I loved him. And he stars in I Saw the Devil, and he's like this agent whose wife gets killed, and he just goes rogue to find the guy that kills him. And you think that's going to be the whole movie? That is not the whole movie. That's maybe the first third of the movie, and
Mhm.
where it goes from there is more psychologically twisted than I think most people that I tell to watch this film expects, and that's why I love it. So yeah, it's a good film. It's twisted, but it's good.
That's awesome. Well, let's jump into this because the first film we're talking about, The Wrath of Becky, which you guys can check out in theaters, and I believe it's also going to be on VOD this upcoming Friday. One of the things that came with Lock-In back in 2020 was this little indie home invasion film that could called simply titled Becky, and it starred Lulu Wilson and Kevin James in his first dramatic role. And yeah, I think we both saw this like within like a month of its release.
Mm-hmm.
What like as far as like this like the first installment goes, like what did you where does it stand for you?
I I really enjoyed it. Um, Kevin James was having this COVID like renaissance going on. I don't know if it was just COVID related or if it was just like, him trying to just branch out and get noticed, but he started this YouTube channel, and it was he had these different skits, like one of his reoccurring skits, yeah, was the sound guy just kind of inserting himself into classic scenes, which was hilarious. But then he did other stuff too on the channel, and it was a solid, almost like a year of just solid content. And I was like, this is just fantastic. And I can't remember the timeline if those came out before or after Becky, but it was kind of along the same time. And I saw this trailer for Becky, and I'm like, oh shit, Kevin James is in a beard, and he may or may not be a Nazi, and he's the villain, and it looks crazy, and it kind of looks low budget, but not crazy low budget. And it was just like this perfect little pocket film that, it's one of those horror movies where they don't spend a lot of money, but they use the money well that they have, and it does well. And I don't think it was a blockbuster or anything, but I remember a lot of people were just like, the King of Queens is a Nazi villain. I got to see this. And then Lulu Wilson was just a standout in it, and she was fun, and it was a good film. It was a fun film, and I haven't rewatched it. I was tempted to rewatch it before we talked about it, but I kind of just wanted to, keep the current one in my head and not mesh the two. But I remember it had just about the right amount of violence. It was fast paced. I wanted more, and it kind of left the door open for something maybe to come out later on. And it had kind of like this little lore thing around this key, and it was fun. I liked it. It was something I wasn't expecting. I didn't really know what to expect from it, and I came out pleasantly surprised.
I grew up watching King of Queens, and it's still to this day is one of my favorite sitcoms of all time.
For sure.
Uh, I love Kevin James, anything that he's in. I was so excited when he started making YouTube content because it was like just like him being able to just be himself. But I was
Hmm.
so enthralled with the idea of him playing a neo-Nazi and a bad guy in a horror film. And he's so menacing in this movie.
Hmm.
I did go back and rewatch it for because I wanted a refresher and I forgot like genuinely how much I love the movie. It's such a fun film, like you said, like it's a brisk, just super fast paced, but it works really well. And like you said, like there's not a whole lot of budget to this. It's definitely an independent film, but they definitely use their budget really wisely. The film
Hmm.
looks pretty good. The gags in it are really top notch. Kind of cliche, but yeah, also I think it really works. I think you need that kind of cliche because there's also this like naivety around Becky's character because she's essentially a teenage girl that is kind of put in this position to like essentially recreate some of like Home Alone.
Oh, so much. It was R-rated, bloody Home Alone, where the villains were 0% likable, and you were just like, as soon as the R-rated content comes on, you were like, just turn on the faucet and go hardcore, and they totally did.
Yeah, I really um genuinely had a fun time. So I was really excited when they announced the Wrath of Becky, which is the sequel to it. And I would dare say like the first one, it didn't necessarily it's not a blockbuster by any means, but it definitely feels like it's in the early makings of kind of like a cult classic.
Yeah, I would say so. I feel like I have yet to meet a person that's watched it that was like, oh, well, this wasn't worth it, or this wasn't at least interesting. I think it went straight to streaming, so it didn't make a lot of money. Like, I just googled the box office and it literally says 1.1 million. So I can't. Well, actually, Wikipedia says it did go to theaters and it only made like 200,000 in theaters, which doesn't surprise me. Like, it was like 2020 was a crazy year,
Yeah.
and they didn't spend a lot of money on, you know um this didn't get a crazy ad campaign or anything like that. But I mean, clearly it made enough for someone to invest in a sequel, which was cool. I didn't hear about it announced. I literally saw a trailer for it and was like, holy shit, I had no idea this was coming. I reached out to you immediately. I'm like, did we get a screener for this? Because it's a Quiver film, and we get a lot of the Quiver films, and I really want to see, really want to see this movie. And thankfully, you were able to secure me one, and I literally, I mean, I watched it like the second I got it. I'm like, I got to see this. I got to see where they went with this.
Well, I mean, I guess that's a great segue to just to kind of share like general thoughts on this movie. Uh, does it stand up to the original for you? Like, what are your thoughts kind of coming out of the Wrath of Becky?
Literally, I stopped the trailer about 20 seconds in. I didn't want any of the film to be ruined for me. So I went into it very, very cold, and I'll save things for spoiler talk. But there were things that I really, really liked about the progression of the film, especially like compared to who the bad guys were in the first one, what the bad guys were in this one, and how it was very relevant and stuff like that. I thought that was neat. I liked just seeing Becky grow up a little bit and see where she's at. And we got Kevin James in the first one, and I think this one would have been awesome if we got like a Ray Romano or another, TV sitcom dad to fill the role, but we didn't. But the celeb that hasn't been around for a while that filled that role was fun to see. So it was gory. It was a nice progression in terms of villains. There was a lot of things that I liked. I don't think it's as good as the first film. It's around the same time, but it felt a little rushed and a little shorter compared to the first film. And I'm just hoping it's the sophomore film in a trilogy because it feels like there's a lot left on the table. And I'd be interested for them to get a chance to finish it out. I feel like there was things there were directions they could have gone in this one that they didn't necessarily go to, and it's not like I felt robbed, but I wasn't as like satisfied as I was with the first film at the end.
Yeah, that's how I felt. I definitely feel like there's so much more that they can do. And even like the way that the story setup is, when you look at the first film, it's very much that home invasion. When you look at this film, it's almost a straight up slasher.
Mm-hmm.
And so like tonally, they're playing around with different things. I think there are things that this movie does better than the first film, and I think there are things that it doesn't do better. So I'm like very split on it. I agree with you. I think that it's nice seeing the progression of the world. I really like the confidence that Lulu Wilson has as Becky in this one. She did a fantastic job. I even kind of like some of the other things, but it just felt like I don't know, to a degree, like it's really hard to talk about this without jumping into spoilers. I really think that this movie could have it's kind of, as you mentioned, like originally, like it's building up this mythology that I really liked about it. The ending to this is really kind of far-fetched and like really just over the top, and yeah, I do feel like this movie definitely feels rushed in certain places, but at the end of the day, it's a really fun film, to say the least.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
So, uh we're gonna jump into spoilers now. So before we get there, let's go ahead. Let's show our cards and let's do ratings on a
Mm.
scale of 1 to 5. What would you give this?
I'd give it a solid three, 3.5. I mean, it's still enjoyable, but I mentioned I had some disappointments with it, but it certainly wasn't a letdown or anything. I got some things that I wanted out of it, and I wasn't done with the franchise afterwards. I still wanted some more, so I'd say a 3.5.
I'm gonna go a 3. I think this movie has a really strong legs to stand on, and it really has a promising direction for the future of where they go, especially with how the character ends up at the end of it. But I agree with you. I think that there's a lot that this film kind of let me down on certain aspects, but then at the same time, like really just had me enthralled and like just drew me to the edge of my seat. I had an absolute blast with this. So we're
Mhm.
gonna go ahead and jump into spoilers now. If you guys, The Wrath of Becky opens up from Quiver Entertainment beginning this Friday, May 25th. So if you guys hit pause and come back, and then let us know what you guys thought of The Wrath of Becky. But yeah, can we start off by talking about this key?
Mm.
Because I genuinely thought that like it was gonna be like a storyline that they didn't bring over, or like I thought that maybe it's just me. I thought that the key was going to be like the central like thing of like how Sean William Scott and the nobleman like ended up like being connected to her. So I liked that they left that kind of like open ended for a third film.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like they should have cut the stuff about the key out, or at least left it for the end as a tag, because it was kind of a um yeah, it was kind of a mislead in that for a second there, I thought we were going to go like Indiana Jones, Tomb Raider, Nazi memorabilia, lore type stuff with that key, because I totally forgot about the key. And then when they bring it back up again, I'm like, oh yeah, let's get into more deeper revelations on what that key is. And then um, they go the nobleman route, and immediately I was as soon as they introduced the nobleman I was like, okay, these two things are not connected. Like it's gonna go this route. So I was a little disappointed we didn't get more on that key, but that's what I'm holding out hope for a third one, that they can bring it home with a story around that.
Yeah, I really wish that they would have like you said, like either made it the main focal point of this one to kind of like honestly, I thought they were gonna kind of like Fast and Furious this, where
Mm,
like you have one villain in one film, and then that sibling of that villain is like the next central antagonist for it. And I thought that was going to be how they handled it. Um, but I don't know. Like I feel like the key should have either been like a just a post credit thing, or it should have been like the focal point of the film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think that was a misstep. However, I did like the direction they went with the villains, in that the first movie, the villains were these neo Nazis. The evolution of that, instead of just doing more neo Nazis, they did the nobleman, and the nobleman is clearly, I mean, unabashedly a moniker for Proud Boys, and the references to Proud Boys and sedition and insurrection and plots to kidnap a governor. I at times I was like, are they referencing the actual events, or are they referencing other ones? But it was basically you know, they kind of nodded to January 6th and other things that happen in real life, plots to kidnap and kill a governor, and then they turn it into, oh, we're going to go after this one who has a very Hispanic last name, and for X, Y, and Z and alpha male stuff. And it was very, very relevant. And I appreciated that. I think there was, it's an easy role to play. You search alpha male on Twitter and you're going to find an abundance of character traits that you could just copy paste into a script. And I thought for the most part, they did really well with that. It was paint by numbers, Proud Boys-esque villains.
So I don't know enough about like the Proud Boys to like actually like draw from it.
Good for
I
you.
think
That's
with
great. I'm happy for you, honestly.
I think it's really when you kind of like that a lot of the ideology kind of starts to shape when they're at Daryl's house, and like Twig is kind of given his like speech on like the fembots
Mm-hmm.
and or the femdroids, whatever he calls them. But like to me, like I took it as like people like just being like a patriotic extremist group, which
Yeah,
I guess is that what Proud
pretty
Boys would
much.
definitely be. Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Your
I'm
your play soldier militia types that, some of them might actually have military background, others wish they did, or played a lot of Call of Duty and feel like that's an equivalent. And there's always your super ridiculous conspiracy members amongst the group, hence the fembot guy with his rants, and then the tiers of commitment with the other guys, and then they all kind of gravitate towards these alpha male types, which Daryl was, played by Sean William Scott. And yeah, I mean, it was just it was well done. I did appreciate that. I was like, I I saw what they were doing, and I feel like they pulled that off. Of
so I don't want to get like too heavy into the politics of this movie, but like what would be
course not.
the difference between like so a group like Proud Boys and the Klan? Like is it
Oh,
like
I mean, it's just levels of racism. Most folks, would like a good example would be to go back and watch American History X, right? Edward Norton has this big ass swastika on his chest. He's got his shaved head at earlier points in the movie. He's got this whole crowd of guys that just gravitate towards him. They love him. They'll follow him into battle. At the dinner table in one of the scenes, his sister or somebody accuses him of being a KKK member, and he gets offended by that. He's like, the Klan is just nothing but a bunch of rednecks. They're not loyal to the cause. They're not patriotic. They're just a bunch of people that wear the hoods and everything. They're playing cosplay. So in the racist world, the Klan is kind of the joke, and everybody else is like, we're on a higher level than that. We're pure, we're more patriotic, we have a better cause than whatever the Klan does. So yeah.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below, wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
Interesting. Good to know. I feel
Go back
I guess
and watch
educated.
American History X. They kind of dive into that, and it is interesting. It's sad, but it's interesting.
Yeah. So like I guess like I don't know. Like I purposely don't like follow like
It's probably better for your health, but
groups like that. Like I feel like I know enough to like be educated about where they are in terms of like history, but not necessarily like ideologies and like how they are currently still moving within our country.
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, that's good, and I'm not suggesting you to. But I noticed that they definitely kind of mirrored these guys off of there, even down to the name. And then, Daryl's character was very much kind of crafted after your Enrique Terrio types, your other alpha males, and I thought he pulled it off. He's this guy, he eats steak and he lives out on the land, and they got a mission and it's important and it's vital and loyalty above all, and then these other guys kind of gravitate towards him and follow him and everything. And I thought that was an interesting choice for the villain, and I immediately disliked him. So I was happy to see them be slowly torn apart throughout the film.
Yeah, I think that it's one of the things that the filmmakers of both of these films do really well is they kind of bring out the ugliest in humanity, and they set it down in real world. So like when it does come, like you're like, oh, okay, I don't feel as bad that you have now been ripped apart by a boat motor or a lawnmower in this case. But I really like Sean William Scott in this movie. I thought that I don't think that he's like, it's weird to like compare him to Kevin James, but it feels like it's hard not to, because like they were both big names in comedy in the 90s, and then now they're kind of playing these like real scumbag types. And I really wish that like Sean William Scott would do more dramatic roles, because I think that he carries it. Like even when he's not menacing, I feel like he does a good job at being a good dramatic actor.
Well, maybe he'll come back. I mean, I don't know what the truth is in terms of his career. I've heard things like he was blacklisted. I heard things like he had family issues and walked away from Hollywood. So I don't know if this is just like a favor he did or something fun, or if this is on the verge of him coming back. But as much as I despised his character, I did appreciate seeing him on screen, and I even showed the trailer to Maddie, and she was like, oh my gosh, it's Sean William Scott, and I'm not the huge, like the biggest American Pie fan or anything like that, but I did like him in other movies like The Rundown and stuff like that. I thought he had a lot of talent, and so maybe we'll see more of him after this.
So he's done one other film in the um sorry, in the horror realm called Bloodline back in 2018. It was a Blumhouse film,
Hmm.
and the synopsis here on IMDb says Evan values family above all else. And when things and anyone who gets in between him, his wife, and his newborn son learns that the hard way. But when it comes to violent tendencies, it seems the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. This is
Never heard of
also
this film.
a movie that has been on my list for a long time.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, he's really sporadic. He did the Lethal Weapon series a couple years ago. Looks like he was in Super Troopers 2. But yeah, it definitely just looks like he's just kind of hasn't really done a whole lot in the last 10 years. So it is nice to kind of see a familiar face to do it. And I mean he does bring a lot of like the eeriness that this role needs.
Yeah. 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 Um, I appreciated him. I think it was nice having him as the leader of the bad guys. But honestly, as with the first one, the star of the film was Lulu Wilson. I think she
Absolutely.
did great. This gal is 17 years old. She's had 15 movies, almost as many movies as years she's been on the earth. And that's not including the 10 or 12 TV appearances that she's been on and countless commercials that she's done. I don't know. At first I thought she was like a nepo baby, like the child of Owen Wilson or something like that. I don't think that's the case. I don't know where she came from, but she's great. She's great in this. I think I think that's the other thing. That's one of the things that I didn't go full crazy on the ratings for this film. While I liked her progression as a character, I felt that we could have had a little more um, development with her. I feel like if you watch, I went back and watched the trailer, obviously with Maddie after I saw the film, and I saw the trailer, and the trailer kind of gives a little glimpse of her going through foster parents and leaving them, and then finally landing at this lady's house and everything. And as quick as it is in the trailers, it's almost that quick in the film. It's very
Yeah.
much like beat, beat, beat. And there's this fun little animated drawn title sequence that kind of shows her a little bit, which I gotta say is a little weird because some of those pictures depicted her as like a sexy, like mid-20s gal, and then other pictures were more to her character, which was this teenage girl. And I'm like, is this like projecting where you want the character to go? Otherwise, it's a little weird how
Yeah.
much you're like aging her up in some of these pictures. But I thought that we could have used a little more build up to her. And then when she does decide to go after these guys, she almost reverts to childlike behaviors at times. Like she doesn't put on the hat from the first one, but she does kind of wear this weird outfit that just it was like, wait, do we go into a Disney film or to a Home Alone style film with these outfits? And not saying I need her to be in like, Lara Croft wear or full SWAT gear or something else,
Or
but it just kind of felt like they couldn't decide if she was a badass with trauma issues and slightly psycho, or a child, or a Harley Quinn type character. And I feel like they need to figure that out if they're going to have a third film.
yeah, it definitely seemed like you could definitely see that she had gotten like a lot smarter in terms like because like when they start the very little you do see of the foster homes like in the prologue to this movie, gotta definitely see that she's a lot more like wiser in terms of like kind of how to be cunning and like how to be this like con artist aspect of it. And then you kind of get to also see like her kind of be a little bit more confident. She's more quippy. And like I enjoyed like that aspect because I felt like it made her character a lot more fun to where she kind of got lucky a lot of times in the first film. Whereas in this one, like she felt like it was more methodical. They had training montages with her. But yeah,
Mm,
like it feel like they had callbacks to the first film, but it feels like they never really knew how to like implement them, which
mm,
is like really sad because within the matter of a year, you lost your mother and you watched a neo-Nazi kill your father. And so
mm.
there's so much trauma here they could have explored a little bit more of like her like mental health journey, but also like even having a character like Elena um who is like this like surrogate mother figure, like having her aspect of the story like just also seems like a wasted opportunity
Yeah.
because that's kind of the linchpin that eventually like that causes her to go after the nobleman.
Yeah, it was definitely a misdirect from the trailer because the trailer made it look like they killed her dog. And you know, like let's just leave that to John Wick. We don't need any more dog killing movies. But I'm glad that was a misdirect. But yeah, like Elena seemed like this interesting character, and I didn't know if she was gonna be like the strong rock for Becky or if she was gonna be like the funny sidekick, like the blind lady in the Deadpool films. I kind of got similar vibes, but her character was removed from the film as quickly as she was introduced into the film, and so I didn't really get a lot of time to cherish that or to apply that to Becky's character. One of the things I did like was there was this little montage, this little Laurie Strode montage of Becky like in the woods and working on her skills and running and doing all this knife stuff and everything. And then as soon as the bad guys show up in the house, they fuck her up. Like you are reminded quickly that she is still a little girl, and doesn't matter what kind of training she does, three grown men that surprise her are going to get the upper hand. And I did appreciate that. That was a breath of fresh air in the beginning. Sure, she gets the jump on him later and uses surprise and other techniques to take him down. But I did like how I really did feel like they were doing this Laurie Strode type thing where she was like getting ready for the next time, and then immediately she was overpowered and kind of helpless. And I thought that was good writing in that part of the film.
Yeah, because you need that reminder that at the end of the day, like she's still a child.
Yeah.
I think it's really what helps the story kind of stand apart from like other films that are trying to tell similar or even the same exact story, is that you have a child that is been traumatized. And I think that like I liked those montages because like for what little development we had, like you can still see that like here's a person that is clearly like bottling up her feelings and thus is resulting in these like really unhealthy violent tendencies, but you're also at the same time like using that trauma to say, all right, I'm going to make sure that I'm prepared for the next time something like this happens.
Yeah. And she's definitely still traumatized in this film. Like she is there are heavy Harley Quinn style moments where it's just like mental break, and she she gets into the torturous nature of her killings a little too much, or she straight up hallucinates like more brutal killings than things that she currently has within her power to do. And I did like that. That is laying the seeds for something that could be really interesting in a third film, depending on where they go with it. But I do think that the happenstance of her just falling into the lap of another racist group has been played out. If there is a third film, I'm not saying she needs to go all, 007, agent on call being sent to sent to these other groups, like they kind of hint at the end of this. Don't they like recruit her into the CIA or something at the end of this film?
Yeah, so she does get in the post credit scene. She does come into the CIA, and like the last of the noblemen that like escaped, like she blows them up with the bazooka.
That's right.
So
That's right.
she
And that
is in
was
the
so
CIA.
comical that I almost forgot about it. I just now remembered that that happened.
Yeah.
Um, so for one, I don't know why movies still get this wrong, but the CIA generally operates outside of America and the FBI operates internally. So it always like bugs me when like the CIA, like hires you to do ops within America. Unless that's the thing, they're going to send her overseas, into the heart of Russia or somewhere to weed out the rest of the villains. I just hope they don't go too ridiculous because she is still a girl. I mean, unless they really age her up, I just don't want to see Agent Becky, the missions of Agent Becky. I'd still like to see her kind of feel like she has to go intervene in something. Maybe not, she's doing another job and she accidentally pisses off another racist group. But I feel like between the key and her inner trauma and her, insanity, I feel like those three things need to combine into the third film, and less of an action and more of a she has to do this to like clear her what's Black Widow say to clear her get the red out, of her ledger, to clear her ledger. Feel like, we need some there's going to be a third film. We need some closure to all of this to happen.
I feel like you need that closure for it to be like a complete trilogy.
Yeah.
Because I don't feel like there's for stories like this, like I had a lot of fun with the first film, so I was like really surprised that they announced this film. I had a lot of fun with this film, so I'm really hoping that they make a third film. But this isn't a series that I feel like you can just continue to do on and on and on. Like there's only so much series like stories that you can tell in this way. We brought this bring it back to like the comparison of Home Alone. When you get past a certain point in the Home Alone series, those movies just become repetitive and forgettable. And so like you said, like going against like, two strong racist groups, like it would just kind of seem like to go that route would be like laid out for the third one. Um
Yeah.
and so like I don't know, like I when you look at it, like the first film is like almost like a straight up like it's a home invasion that feels like it's set up within like not as masterfully as like the strangers, but something along that line.
Sure.
And then this one feels like a throwback to like 80s slasher. So I feel like I would really like to see her and Katie Seagal kind of team up for like a third film and kind of like get to the end, and like maybe Katie's like a mentor and like helps her work through the trauma.
Yeah. What I do appreciate, I mean, I said I don't think this film is as good as the first film. I feel like there's a lack of substance in this film, but what I do appreciate is the innocence of it. Like it is a slaughter house slasher film type thing, but it doesn't go, it's not like Last House on the left, or it doesn't go into like super dark stuff, thankfully. And I think that's because of the main protagonist being I'm pretty sure she's still a teenager in this film. She's a
Six.
teenager in real life.
Yeah, she's
She's
16 in
what?
this movie.
She's
16.
16. Okay.
Mm.
And so I appreciate that them keeping her young and kind of innocent. It does work for the film. And it doesn't, it's just her versus bad guys. There's a simpleness to the nature of the film. And yes, it does feel kind of empty at times, but it's still fun. So I guess that would be the challenge if, this came 3 years after the first one, whoever the writer or creator is of this trilogy, I guess that would be the interesting thing to see is if they continue with that kind of innocence, or if 3 years down the road she's aged up and they try to do a slightly more serious take on whatever she's faced up against in the third film. But just the fact that I would be interested in seeing more means that I had a good enough time in this film to not want to just shut it all down. I sometimes you see a sequel come out to a film and it just totally just ruins it, and that I don't think was the nature of this. I thought it was fun, super fun at times, and it was a good time, and I enjoyed it and would enjoy seeing at least one more.
Yeah, so this one is actually written by a different duo. So the first film is
Really?
written by Ruckus Sky, Lane Sky, and Nick Morse. And The Wrath of Becky is written and directed by Matt Angel and Suzanne Kutt. And I like the fact that no shade against like the any of the writers on the first film. I like the fact that they brought a female voice in for this film because I feel like it gives it a little bit more of that authentic uh feel to Becky's character, especially
Mm,
processing trauma. Because one of the things that I think is really interesting when you're talking about the concept of processing trauma and like PTSD is when you're doing it on top of puberty. I always feel like it heightens everything because
mm,
I don't know about your teenage experience, but my teenage experience, everything felt like the end of the world. And
mm-hmm,
I couldn't imagine adding in the loss of both of my parents into those teenage years.
mm-hmm,
And so to kind of process that and then 2 years later also lose what an individual who basically became a second mother to her kind of within the span of 2 years really uh doubles down. I think bringing on Suzanne Kutt kind of bring in this feminine this female viewpoint allows that story to kind of feel a little bit more authentic. But I think that if you're gonna do it for a third film, I would love to kind of see this same creative team do something on a larger scale. Um, I still think the first film's a better film, but I think the way that they kind of were able to kind of get creative with some of the elements of this film are stronger in this movie.
it is interesting just looking at it. It is interesting that, I mean, literally none of the creative crew, the writers or the directors from the first film, came over. Yes, Nick Morris is credited, but only as characters created by him. He did not have any writing in this film. So that is, I mean, normally you see some new people come in, and at least one or two people holding on, but to switch out the writers and directors completely between two films, that is interesting. And I'm honestly surprised because I didn't feel the writing was that different that it was noticeable. I felt like it was a progression of the from the first one, even though I didn't agree with all of the writing things. But yeah, I'll be interested in, and maybe that's an angle, the puberty angle, and just the delayed life experiences angle. Maybe that'll be brought into the third film because if she's 16 and the next film could be another 3 years down the road, so she's in her later teens or early 20s, whatever they decide for her character. Is she having a somewhat of a normal life? Is she dating? Does she have a mistrust for everybody? Does that come into play? Hopefully not in the cliched, oh, her boyfriend's the villain type thing, but um, I think that could be an interesting thing. I think
Yeah.
this is what I'm saying. Like maybe I'm hoping for too much, and my ideal third film would be more of a drama and how this all has really just screwed up this little girl and turn her into this psycho for this third film. But there's so many ways to take this, and I think that's just a credit to a well-made character that's both portrayed well by the actress and written well by the creative team, and Yeah, I mean, I didn't give it a 3.5 isn't crazy high, but that doesn't mean I didn't like it. I still had a good time.
So I don't like I'm pulling it up now. I don't know if she had any like hand, but so Lulu Wilson was a was an executive producer on she was not on the first film, but she is on this film. She's a
Well,
she
that's
was
just her and her agent and whoever else is on her team being smart. I mean,
yeah,
that's
but
just good.
I
Good for her.
I think with her being like an executive producer, I think she was able to kind of develop a little bit more of where this character was going to go and kind of like help in that like that process.
Hmm.
And so like you said you brought up a drama, dude. I think honestly, for as much as I've loved these first two films being thriller and horror, I
Hmm.
would love to see a drama and a character study be done on this character. I think that uh she definitely has the mental health and grief and trauma to definitely warrant a journey, especially with how much uh how little we actually got to kind of see her actually be developed in this movie.
Yeah, well, I think she's got a hell of a career in front of her. I mean, she's 17. She already has 26 acting credits in her name, to her name. Her next role is apparently only a one episode spot, but it's on the next Mike Flanagan series, which is great. She'll I don't know if she's sharing scenes with Mark Hamill or some of the other great cast that's in that, but Mike Flanagan is one of my favorite current creators. I don't like everything he does, but he's very interesting, and so is Lulu Wilson. I hope she continues to grow because
Yeah.
that is an incredible. Uh, I'm not for child labor, and I hope she's having some type of a decent childhood. I hope it's not another Colin McCulkin or Justin Bieber situation where we learn down the road that she just wasn't allowed to be a human being. I hope she's enjoying life, but wow, I mean, I feel like the sky's the limit with where her career could go based on what she's been in so far.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I want to switch gears real quick and I want to ask two things,
Yeah.
both coming back to the nobleman. There's a scene where the guy that is kind of like shaky and like doesn't want to be in anything to do with the insurrection, and Daryl and yeah, he basically like they get they could do that callback from the first film for the Brotherhood.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you didn't rewatch it for in anticipation, but that got me thinking. Like, I'm curious if like this is this like the same organization or like a sect of the the group we saw in the first film.
I mean, it could be, if you want to go down that route. The key has three triangles on it, doesn't it? So maybe there are three arms where the neo Nazis are one arm, the nobleman is one arm. It would certainly be in line with history when some of these groups that hated each other came together for we're better together than apart, like they do. The Klan and neo-Nazis would come together for a cross burning, and even though they claimed they didn't believe in the same things, they would come together for the betterment of white supremacy. So maybe that's the thing. Maybe there's a third arm that gets announced in the third film, and those make up the three triangles and whatever that key is. But I did not make the connection. If they said for the Brotherhood in the first film as well, then yeah, maybe the Brotherhood is made up of multiple organizations and all
That's
leading up to something in the third film.
that's fascinating. Like I didn't know that there would be like different tiers of it, and like I didn't again, I don't really know a whole lot about like extremist groups in America, like the history of stuff like that. I'm always like fascinated to learn about it. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think the if you do end up taking that route in a proposed third film, then it gives all of like the callbacks to the key and like it being a map with coordinates on it. Like it gives it purpose rather than just kind of being like something that feels like a distraction in this movie.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I didn't connect that dot. If I would have rewatched Becky before this, I might have noticed that. So that is interesting. That feels like it's on purpose. So yeah, maybe there is a plan in place for something to come. That's funny. And for listeners, please don't put me on a watch list because it seems like I know a lot about certain groups. I I've always been intrigued by them as possible villains for a future project, and I do have a project that involves some of these characters. I write horror mysteries, and by project I mean having them as the villains. So, this isn't so I know I have my background blurred, but these are all comics. These aren't like, uh chronicles of the KKK behind me. So please please don't assume that I'm some expert on the matter. It's just intriguing from a villainous standpoint.
That's perfectly 100% fine. And like speaking, like keeping in line with the subject of villainy, like
Mm-hmm.
how did you feel about the Daryl twist at the very end of the movie?
Remind me.
So there's a point in this movie where she's trying to find Daryl's not introduced, but the three guys at the diner are talking about Daryl. So
Yeah.
she's like, I looked up like there are two Daryls in here, and the first one
Oh,
is like
yes.
old lady that's like smoking on like
Yes.
oxygen, and it ends up being Sean William Scott's mom in the end.
Hmm. I totally called that, honestly. I was waiting for her to show back up. I'm like, she's too interesting of a character for it to be a throwaway. I was
Yeah.
like, guaranteed she's the mom of whoever the other Daryl is. I literally called it in the scene. And I liked it because that's usually the case. Especially with alpha males. They're always ends up being a mama's boy, and then, kind of like the Emperor's New Clothes, she's the real villain or whatever, and the Sean William Scott is like the grug or whatever the henchman was in Emperor's New Clothes. I kind of felt like that. Like I was just waiting for her to show back up. Honestly, were you
Yeah.
surprised?
No, like I knew it was coming too. Like I felt the same exact way. I I felt like to me like I I liked that it she came back and kind of had like a bigger role. Like I really wish it kind of would have been like one of those like sub things where like you don't necessarily meet her, but like you have like scenes where like the two Daryls are talking, and but you only see like their nose down
Mm-hmm.
and kind of stuff like that. So like it makes it feel a little bit more impactful versus like this like very kind of like predictable cliche like James Bond moment.
Yeah. And by Emperor's New Clothes, I meant the Emperor's New Groove. And by drug, I meant Kronk. So hopefully people knew what I was talking about because I was just speaking. But yeah, I liked her. I liked her coming back. and it just spoke more towards it's bigger than this. That was the only other thing, like he kept on hinting at the big thing goes down tomorrow, and I was kind of sad that more. I just wanted the body count to be more. I was like, when's the point where Daryl calls in his other troops, and then is Lulu outgunned? How's she gonna get out of this? It was really just once she shows up on the property, it's just like waiting for the people we've seen to be killed, and then that was it. Like I was really waiting for that second batch of villains, the second string to come in and offer more of a challenge, I guess.
Now, that's one of the things that like hearing you kind of talk about that is like there were articles, I don't remember the guy's name, but he's the writer director behind the Human Centipede trilogy.
Oh,
And the thing about like that trilogy is it went from being 3 people to
yeah,
12 people to 500. And like it just kind of seems like they copy and pasted the body count from the first film into this one. And like that scene where like she's like going down and she's just going through like the spreadsheet of like all of the nobleman members, and you're just seeing how big this organization is. And it's like they're talking about big numbers at this rally. It's like, why are we, you're right, like why are we not seeing that here
yeah,
now?
yeah, or like a post credit scene that was more along the lines of that, like she's got that thumb drive and she's got that list, and less Agent Cody Banks and more her, continuing her vengeance, like I it's called the Wrath. I wanted to see more fallout, and I really did expect, like, as dumb as it would have been, I expected like a bus full of noblemen to show up, like Daryl hits a button and you see all these people taking out their pagers and they're like, oh shit, the alpha male is calling us to the den, let's get our guns and go, and it didn't. Maybe that was a budget thing or something, but yeah, the body count, because the trailers, I mean, she's covered in blood. I'm like, oh shit, we're gonna double triple down on this. It's gonna explode like you normally expect in a horror slash action sequel. You expect the body count and the gore and the craziness to expand, and so that was kind of disappointing that it really didn't. It was just kind of the same amount of people, and then it was done, and that's what it's almost the exact same runtime, but it felt incredibly shorter for some
So
reason.
so this movie is 83 minutes and the first one's 91, I believe.
So that's not crazy difference.
It's not, but like you literally could like even if you had like a I don't know, maybe it was a budget restraint, but like even like you don't need to have like a large like epic battle sequence to give more
Sure.
bodies. Like you could have literally done it in like a montage moment.
Sure, definitely of young female teenage Rambo montage, of just more of that, more of those booby traps in the woods type thing, and yeah, when that scene of her coming upon all the weapons in the barn, I was like, we're gonna see her use every single one of these to just obliterate an army of incels, and we just didn't get that. And so maybe that's what the third film will be if they make it. I would hope that it's not just her versus another four or five guys.
I really think that if you're gonna do like, especially now the fact that she's like in the CIA, like feels like a misstep to just kind of like copy and paste that for a third time and just
Mm-hmm.
say, all right, this is what we're gonna do. Like, I want to see like really some like epic bloody fights because like the only thing that I didn't see any trailers for this movie. The only thing I knew about it was Sean William Scott, and I'd seen the face after she kills Twig. Like that was the only picture I'd
Yeah,
seen. So I was
yeah,
like, all right, cool. She's covered in blood. Like, where are we gonna do it? Then like there's maybe like 6 people she kills total in this, and so
yeah,
it's like, eh.
yeah, yeah. So again, not incredibly disappointing.
No.
But I just had some hopes. I had some hopes, and so don't get your hopes up. That's always the name of the game. But I do hope to be surprised in another 3 years to have a sequel if her career allows it, and hopefully at that point she'll be like, "Look, if I'm going to return to this franchise, we need to step up our game and really bring it home." But this kind of stuff, it reminds me of things like the Collector series. It had fun ideas, and I just wanted a little bit more, and we never got that third film. So I hope that's not the case for Becky.
Yeah.
Um, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I was trying to think of like other like duologies to compare it to that never kind of got there. Um, their third film, like you brought up, like Agent Cody Banks earlier, didn't get one. Honestly, that film did not age well, so it doesn't really need
Nope.
one. But yeah, I would love to see a third film in this series, and I think that like the Collector, those guys have been trying to make the collection for years,
I
and
know. And every time you hear like
so sad.
you get like a IGN article about, oh shit, here's the update, and then crickets. And that is an example of a film that went from a home invasion style, limited body count, to this massive uptick in body counts and gore and lore and craziness and traps in the second film. I mean, the what was the collect? Let's see, what was the second one? The Collected,
Yeah, I
maybe.
think so. Hold on.
That was great. That was great. It was a crazy well made sequel that it upped the ante in all categories, and then it had a great cliffhanger at the end that could be a send off for the series, or it could lead into the third and final film. So maybe someday we'll get a collector, the collection. I know the lead character isn't like crazy busy. I don't even know if he's still acting, but I've loved him in the role. So bring that back. But yeah, we'll see. That's the only horror duology I could think of right now that definitely screamed for third film, and we haven't got it yet.
Yeah, one of these days we'll get it. I love those two movies. They are
It's so good.
like they're so good, and like they need a third one. So,
Mm-hmm.
but The Wrath of Becky is playing in theaters starting May 25th. Um, as of this podcast. But Josh, where can people find you online?
You can find me on the other Victims and Villains show that I do. We talked about Brilliant but Lazy. We'll put up a couple episodes every month. Otherwise, you can find me at Fierce Literature or fiercelit.com. I've got a couple shows still scheduled for the year, so some different Comic Cons going out there. Looking forward to it. Had to cancel a couple this year due to some weddings and a new job and some other conflicts that just happened to coincide with the dates, but still plan to be at Des Moines Comic Con next month, and New York Comic Con in October. So that's the plan. What about you?
You guys can follow me. I am on Letterboxd at Captain Nostalgia, and you guys can follow Abyss Gazing and uh Brilliant but Lazy wherever you guys get your podcast from. So make sure you guys subscribe to both shows. You guys can follow our parent company, Victims and Villains. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube as well. So until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.